mission of this school as I knew it when I was an undergrad, and it was changing at the time, although I didn't realize it, really deeply committed to American landscapes and management historically, famously, really. But also one of the first pieces of Yale, in my experience, to really embrace global contexts seriously at a time when the university as a whole wasn't quite yet there. And how you see that balance or relationship playing out currently in the school. Because I think it's a big difference in the planning profession, which was mentioned earlier, is that American planning schools, for the most part, train professionals to go plan American cities. And the global context is somewhat missing.
Yeah, I think our scholarship is quite diverse and international. And that said, I'm not quite sure, we hear from the students that there isn't quite enough focus on international issues in our classrooms, in our courses. So I don't know, Karen, if you have any reflections about that.
Yeah, well, in terms of the local to the global, and this is something that Al and I have talked about, is that moving forward, how do we keep a foot in our local environment? I mean, the work of the Hickson Center and URI and Alan's workshop, there's a lot of interest in really understanding our local environment, and yet there's this incredible opportunity to be relevant at this totally different scale, and it seems like that's a huge gap in knowledge and policy and potentially impact. And the practice, it's interesting to hear both of you talk about, I wrote down, Deborah, you said, the model that's out of date, and the practice is changing in planning. It's changing very quickly in land use planning, both here and also abroad. One thing that came out of the last IPCC report was, well, the way in which we're planning our cities in many places is absolutely wrong if we actually want to save the planet. It's really good for efficiently moving people around, but not when you've got maybe 6 or 7 billion people living in cities. We've got to actually rethink how we think about planning and not think about it as just about one site or even a neighborhood, but really thinking about this continuum of landscapes and places that it could really affect. One thing that I'd be curious to hear is, based on your experience in the practice and at different universities, and given that the scholarship is changing so quickly, how do we, it's like designing a plane while it's already in flight. These things are already changing so quickly. How do we prepare our students? And I guess here I'm really thinking about students who aren't in, let's say, again, not the students who are in the joint degree program or my students who are deeply embedded in the urban science, but the F&ES or the architecture student who isn't going to be an urban scientist or a planner or a designer. How do we think about training the next generation of architects and the next generation of, let's say, environmental managers who aren't deeply embedded in urbanism? What do we need to do? What do we need to start thinking about? You're up.
Oh, thanks. There is no quick or easy answer to that question. I think we need to look forward, be responsive. I do really believe that we need to engage cross-disciplinarily in order to, like, we might be ahead on this, you might be ahead on this, nursing might be ahead on that, and if we as faculty and leaders are in discussion across disciplines, we can bring our own course material forward. We need to be well-read, in tune, out there in the world, and then bring that back to the classrooms. That sounds like a dodge of an answer, but I don't think that a paternalistic from above, here's what I know the future is going to be, and therefore this is what I'm going to teach you, is at all right, because we don't know. We are part of a large, intelligent community with lots of eyes, ears, hands, and feet out there, and we need to be exchanging information with each other in order to move forward.
Yeah, I have about 4 things that I'm thinking about this. And one is that, if we're really focused on, for instance, for this conversation, urban sustainability and resilience, there are 2 aspects that I think our students are not strong enough in. And maybe it's because we're not providing it, or maybe it's the wave of the future. But one is quantitative work. I mean, if smart cities are the wave of the future, this is all about data. And this is about data-driven decision-making. It's about being able to analyze complex, multidimensional data sets as they change through time. So I think we may want to ramp up some things that have to do with application of quantitative skills to a multitude of disciplines. Another is the connection between our science work and human welfare, is what I'll call it. I mean, we call it environmental justice, but our earliest people in F&ES were the ones who said environmental welfare is intimately linked with human welfare. And I think we could do a lot more in case studies to look at places where that are vulnerable right now, or where we're failing. We had this great case study course this last fall on the Flint, Michigan situation. So I feel as though case studies are a way to motivate all of us to be able to look at the future and understand what skill sets we need to go forward.
I do think there's something we do at the architecture school that I don't want to see go away, but is perhaps the opposite of what Indy is talking about, because I don't know how you quantify it, although I'm interested in all those things too, which is we're responsible for what stuff looks like. And as Elaine Scarry said, totally not a scientist at all, when she was at a recent conference of ours, is beauty still matters. And perhaps in these exceptionally difficult times, beauty really does matter. And of course, there's beauty in forests, in the traditional forest and in the entire natural environment, and then there's beauty in the built environment. I think we need to maybe do a better job of continually reminding our students that they are responsible for all the aspects of what I guess I'll call built environment justice, built environment fairness, the built environment presence, how it performs, who it serves, and what it looks like, because in looking like something, it actually impacts a lot of people. The other thing I'll say to build on what Indy was saying, since we're talking about planning, is maybe, as some of you know, once upon a time, about 60 years ago, Yale actually taught planning. And they closed their planning department for political reasons, literally for political reasons, had to do with the Black Panthers in New Haven. Everything you do and everything we do is inherently political, and I think we need the university on our side to make major forward steps in issues of regional planning and urban planning, and not be resistant to the forces of politics in order to conquer politics, that the planning can be good.
I was in a conversation with Karen and some other people, including Brad Gentry, the other day, and I asked the standard question is, if we want to do more in this area, what don't we have that we need? Big data or whatever, more planners, geographers. And Brad came back, I think quite rightly, and said, how about asking what we already have that's really special and good and build on that? And it leads me to ask you all the question, which if you go to the university administration with proposals or requests, they will ask a version of this question rather pointedly, which is what makes whatever we want to do a Yale thing, something that we will do better than most other people because of who we are and what we have. And I think Indy hinted at that when she talked about getting public health in the conversation, getting nursing in the conversation, getting the School of Management, the law school. The constellation of graduate and professional schools at Yale is fairly
Unrivaled.
replicated at other places. So that may be part of the answer, but I'm pressing for more.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's part of the answer only if the spirit that Indy and I are talking about and the broader attitude among all the deans actually remains the way it was. Because when I interviewed for this job and I said, you know, we really need to have urban design and planning and we could take advantage of cross-disciplinary studies, I was told in the interview, oh, you can't go there, that'll turn into a turf war. Like, no, it's the opposite. It's shared turf, and we can really make it, maybe turf is the wrong word in this room, I'm not sure. And we can make it better because of that. But there is almost maybe a 20th century perception of that. That's how we would deal with this one. In fact, I think we would deal with it in the opposite way, and we'd ask our fellow deans to be part of it as well.
Yeah. And I'm just going to go back to the resources. That I think expressing a need when you go upstairs rarely catalyzes an outcome.
Right.
But expressing successes and vision and ideas and bringing a donor or a couple of donors to the table
You're right.
really makes a lot of difference.
Yeah.
I'm going to just change gears a little bit because I know that there are a number of you who have comments, questions, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to hear from folks in the audience. So we have a couple of microphones, and we'll probably take a few questions at a time, if there are any. I'm sure there are. Mary Evelyn here. If you keep your hands up, we could get the microphones around.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful, and it's great to see the collaboration emerging, not the other side, as you just expressed.
It's Burke and Burke in Burke.
Yeah, exactly. What could be better? Triple squared. So, of course, I'd like to ask about human dimensions and values, but I'll leave that to the side and be more concrete with question of climate change and resilience that is in the background, I think, of sustainability. And for example, LaGuardia Airport is going to be renovated for $4 billion, right? And the rising sea will obliterate that sooner or later. So what is the role of our schools for coastal water properties in Hampton, Virginia, Florida, et cetera, in terms of built environment?
Built environment, that's you.
Oh, nice. Rising waters, that's you.
You know, that is a classic kind of problem that I'm just, in these past few years, learning to negotiate, and there is a lot of expertise out here in the room. As we make resource allocation decisions, investments, planning decisions, we need to know a lot more than we do currently to answer your question, because it's in large measure a time question. You know, the time frame of politics is so different, tragically in some cases, than the time frame of either the built or the natural environment, which themselves have different time frames. And the kind of future professionals that I would hope to see coming out of our programs are people who know enough or who know how to find out enough to begin to negotiate back and forth intelligently between those time frames. So we understand, as big as $4 billion to renovate LaGuardia sounds. By the way, it's chump change these days, but that's too bad. The real question is, so how long is it good for?
Yeah.
When power plants are built or rebuilt now, somebody on one of my design teams described that as being like the Ise Shrine in Japan, which they rebuild on changing. They have two sites. They build one, they take down the other after the lifespan of one, they rebuild the other. And a lot of what we're doing is like that. So it's a wonderfully, I'm not trying to dodge it, it's a wonderfully complex question and exactly the kind of problem that we need to be working on.
I will say, interestingly enough, I think we need to work on it. One of the things I'm quite interested in at the School of Architecture is not only producing great architects, but actually people who studied architecture in order to go on and do other things. And some of those things might be public service, environmental studies, public service, I'll go back and say public service, because the architect comes way too late to that conversation. And we need people in public service, whether in appointed positions or elected positions, to be able to say, what does it mean to spend this money here when it takes 20 years to see the result? And by the time they're calling an architect, give me a great looking terminal. All of the perhaps non-wise decisions have already been made. So I think, if anything, our graduates from both schools need to fully infiltrate the decision-making process so that decisions are better informed and not informed by lawmakers who don't know much and who are on 2-year popularity cycles and make very, very short-term decisions.
My name's Katie. I'm here at the Forestry School. Dean Burke of the Architecture School. I was really interested to hear in your opening remarks that you're actively working on issues of diversity and access in your school. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what concrete steps you hope to make towards that end. And to Dean Burke of the Forestry School, whether you have any similar designs for our school.
You're first.
You've been doing that to me all afternoon. So concrete steps are coming in a number of different ways. One is outreach to deans and chairs of undergraduate programs at predominantly minority schools and state schools, and I'll call more affordable programs that tend to attract students from different socioeconomic backgrounds, because I think the diversity we're looking for in architecture is racial, but it's also strongly socioeconomic as well. So I've been making those calls on kind of a regular basis. I think we'll see the results slowly over time. People don't look at architecture as a way to necessarily make social change, so we also have to, or bring improvement back to their community, or if that's not their motivator, they also don't see it as a way to make a whole lot of money, like, yeah, I should go to the Harvard Business School, because, that's how I get what I want. So I think it's a long-term information and communication process with potential sources of qualified students from different backgrounds. And the other is the funding, which I've been working on really intensely to raise scholarship money, because people from those backgrounds typically not only can't afford the tuition, but the profession itself doesn't really allow you to pay off your loans. So need more funding for scholarships. So right now it's a two-prong attack, and it's in its very early stages, but that's what it looks like.
And for us, I'm just past my first 100 days. I just like doing it. But, it's been clear since before I got here that we really need to be working on diversity, and it's a key component of our strategic plan. We have teams working on it, collecting ideas from all parts of our community, including the alumni who are particularly passionate about this. And then I've been collecting information from the other deans about their successes.
Hi, thank you both so much. I wanted to get back to the idea of shared turf. And while acknowledging that bottom up is important and that resources are very important, I'm wondering if we think that the constellation of energies around the schools can be organized enough to make impact without a shared hub or space, or if you think that some sort of physical space for student collaboration is necessary to make a real impact.
Go.
No, I'm laughing because Karen and I keep revisiting that issue, and in a way that may seem atavistic in a virtual age. I I think it's safe to say strongly believe that we need something like that. You know, there's no need for you to be at a place like Yale if you don't want to be at a place, right? Things can be learned, projects can be done a variety of places, but I think what we value about this particular place is our ability to meet each other and talk and work on things together, and that's going to be the most fun and the most productive. And if the obstacles spatially are too severe, we won't do it as comfortably as, you know. So, but to take a page from Indy, again, the last thing you want to do is go ask a university administrator for space. You want to have it already. So we may be organizing a student occupy.
But the other way to get really great shared programs going is through the students. I mean, I think that the fastest way to get partnerships going is through having people like you who are joint degree students. So.
I want to just quickly comment on a question that Alan, or a hypothetical question about, you know, what do we do really well, you know, if you were to go upstairs, right? And why us, why Yale? And I just think Yale not only plays a leadership role academically, but also in the policy arena, and not only in the United States, but globally. And this is an incredible opportunity.
Maybe more
right?
globally right now.
Oh, gosh. But this is this unprecedented opportunity for our schools to come together. And you know, when I think about the hallmarks of F&ES, it's really about systems thinking. Right? And if we think about the challenges around urbanism, cities, equity, the environment, it's about these connected systems. And so we absolutely have to think of a way to, and multiple ways. I think it's not just one pathway. It's through students, it's through staff, it's through workshops, it's through classes, it's through the deans, it's through faculty. But we have to be very creative in terms of thinking outside the box and think about how are the different ways that we can collaborate and move forward on all of these different issues. I do see that there is this huge knowledge gap right now. A lot of different schools, whether it's of the environment or whether it's planning programs, they're redeveloping themselves to be relevant in the 21st century. And I think in many ways we don't have the turf war here. And so it is an opportunity to move forward. But I think that there are obstacles. I'm a geographer. I think space really matters. And so we need to somehow come up with ways to overcome some of those geographic obstacles. We have just a couple of minutes left. I saw two hands, Chad and Reed. I think we have two microphones coming.
My name is Chad Oliver. I'm a professor in F&ES. Dean Indy knows this a little bit, but I've been working with Alan Arganci in the architecture school on this innovative mass timber construction. In fact, it was our efforts networking in Washington that started that program under the Secretary of Agriculture for national competition for wood building. And we have a paper out that proposes to take the to-be-built sections of New Haven and build them out of wood that shows even the urban-rural connection, that would make this a timber city and would be kind of a showcase for the world. If you look at the amount of steel, concrete, and fossil fuel saved, it would be tremendous. I just wonder, where do we move up in the Yale bureaucracy to get the leverage, to get the attention of the city to consider something like this?
The best, most immediate answer I can give you is that Alan and I have been talking about exactly this, and we have another meeting scheduled for next week. The mayor and some of her associates like the work we do with our building project, and we're rethinking that as well to bring it more into contemporary technology and level of responsibility. And so we see that access point where they're listening to us because of that project to be a point of entry for this larger discussion.
Hi, I'm Reed Lifset. I'm a research scientist on the faculty here at F&ES. Like most people in the room, I think I'm watching national news, and to quote Game of Thrones, I think winter is coming. And I'm just wondering how the deans Burke have had their views about what we should be doing with the schools change with the election of Donald Trump.
You can go first.
I'll start just a bit. Last week, I had regained a bit of optimism. And I have been focused on thinking about our school being unique in providing our students lots of experience, not only in what we're teaching right now about the management of resources, sustainable management of resources, but also providing communication tools for finding common ground and sustaining conflict. And in fact, we'll have a talk next Thursday on just this idea of staying with conflict. So we could be those who are respected enough to engage in a conversation that continues through time. This week, we're backing up the EPA webpage as I speak.
Saturday was
Yeah, I guess Saturday, it really all started. I'm thinking that we can do a really good job focusing on our cities and states as case studies.
Yep,
for-
states' rights are
for
starting to
work.
look really good.
Yeah, so it's really important to me to give our students an optimistic message and a place to look for their leadership where they can be effective. And I'm quite concerned about the federal scene right now, but I really do feel quite good about what's happening in our cities and our states, some of the states.
I recently bought a New England flag. It actually exists. It's not official, but it's a survivor from the Revolutionary period, and I would recommend that affiliation.
So, yes, winter is definitely not going away. But I will say this, I think us architects, we're living in a delightful land of an economy that was improving and a focus on what we did and the glamour and excitement and photographability. I mean, there was never anything better for an architect than Instagram. Life felt great. But in truth, the Trump presidency, for as awful as it is, did not bring on the problems of homelessness, crumbling public schools, failing architecture of every possible sort, no infrastructure. These are problems that we as a profession should have been taking action about long ago. So I feel that this administration, the one piece of small good news, it is going to force us to act, and we needed that.
It's good.
Yeah, right.
Disaster response.
Well, I know we can continue this conversation for a while, but I know a number of folks have to head down the hill and then also go to class. But please, thank you. Well, please join me in thanking Burke and Burke and Plattus.